help me cope with COVID-19 or cope during COVID-19. This is a panel of professionals that are in the industry that's helping out several people and of course, being an intricate part of our community. My name is Richard White, and I'm going to introduce our host for today. Her name is Carmela Monk Crawford, who will be the host of this event for this afternoon. Thank you very much, guys. Housekeeping we'll talk about a little later. Thank you. Carmela?
Good morning or good afternoon. Yes, thank you. Thank you for inviting us to this very important discussion and conversation today, Richard. And I'm so delighted to share this screen today with some distinguished guests, people who are very knowledgeable, and this is their field of expertise. But before we do that, I just want to say a couple of things by way of housekeeping, right? One, it's not too late to invite your friends. Go ahead and share the link that allowed you to walk into this room and share this experience. Do this with your friends and family because this is a conversation and information that they need to know about, right? Also, this webinar will be recorded by our friends at the Berean Seventh-day Adventist Church, and it will be posted to their website probably by this afternoon, so that if you want to go back or you want to share that link with someone, you can do that. Also, you can check out the Berean Seventh-day Adventist Church news website to find further news and events, and that's very important right now. They got a lot of good things going on, resources that people need right now. Also, as I am the host today, I am the editor of Message Magazine, which is your magazine, the voice of spiritual leadership. Righteousness is what we try to say, and social justice in these times. Every day when the news comes through, I want to change what we do because it's so crazy right now. You understand what I mean? But what we want you to do is go to messagemagazine.com, sign up for a subscription, send some information, send a subscription to someone you love who is either incarcerated or in your community. And I believe altogether we can uplift some people. So I would like to start by introducing our guest today. And I have a very skeleton introduction for each one of them, but they are so valuable to this conversation. First up, Sharian Sharomi, who is the founder of the Renewed Mental Health Senior Service. Welcome. She can wave her hand right there. Thank you for coming. And she's a person who today is going to weigh in her expertise along the lines of people who are elderly, Alzheimer's, PTSD, everything along that spectrum. We're so happy to have you here. Next up, Terry Parks, Dr. Terry Parks. Thank you so much for joining us. He's the executive director of a new approach, behavioral health. And this is a person who, along with this practice, is if you get into trouble and you're in the court system, sometimes you might need to go see him because you need a little anger management. Is that right? Wave your hand. I might need to go come see you, travel all the way down there to see you. That's Dr. Terry Parks. Who else do we have here? Oh, my dear friend, a longstanding friend, Dr. Loida Williamson, who is the chair of the psychiatry department at Meharry Medical School, if I said that correctly. Dr. Loida Williamson, so happy to have her here. Then Ms. Allison Barrero Jones. Did I get it right? Did I get it right? Allison Barrero Jones. Yes. She is the founder and CEO of Progression Counseling and Life Coaching. And this is our go-to person on this panel to talk about all things young people and children, right? Finally, we have Ms. Melanie Cunard, if I say that correctly. Also, she is an excellent expert with the Atlanta Public Schools as a school psychologist, and she helps with the high school students. I have a high school senior myself, so we're going to have to come and bounce around to her a couple of times. And so the whole reason why we're here today is because we want to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on our mental health. And unfortunately today, we might have to, a little later on in the in the webinar, we might have to broaden our topic a little bit, because there are some other things in the news that are affecting our mental health. And that would be the latest police-related killings, some of the walking your dog or being in the park while black kind of things. All these things kind of weigh on our people at these times. And so we might have to come back and get in there. But here's my first preliminary question. I'm asked two of these, and then I'm gonna come around, Robin, and ask each one of you some things specifically regarding your practice and your area of expertise. And you may help me out. You may know people. I had a grandfather who lived through the 1919 pandemic, lived through the Great Depression. And what people always say about that generation is sometimes they're closed down and they don't want to talk about it. You know what I mean? And today I was thinking to myself, with everything that's going on right now, it is so pervasive. It is so weighty. What good is it for us to talk about it? Help me. Dr. Lloyda Williamson, help me.
Well, that's an excellent question. Thank you for asking that. I think what we have to understand is that stress accumulates and layers build up, and they can affect us even when we're unaware of it. So we all have daily stressors with work, with school, with finances, with neighbors, with watching the news, as you're talking about, hearing these stories and watching the videos. By the way, I don't watch them because they're too traumatic. Just reading the description is traumatic enough for me. But we all have these daily stressors. And then we may have some additional stressors, particularly for like communities of color, where we're regularly dealing with microaggression and racism on the job or in our community. And so as these stressors add up and add up, if we don't pay attention to them, not only can we have physical problems such as migraine headaches or muscle tension, but we can have more emotional problems. And what starts as a mild anxiety problem can later turn into something much more severe and stressful that causes you to lose your job because you don't get out of bed and you don't go to work and you're not interacting with people, or you're explosive. Or you can even become so overwhelmed and depressed and suicidal that it really has a negative impact on your whole life, your career, your family. And ultimately, if people are stressed out enough, they can attempt suicide, have an overdose, and die. So it's very important for us to pay attention to these little stressors, because our body responds and our mind responds to everything we experience.
What Dr. Allison Barrero Jones, I'm gonna keep saying that just like that all day. What do you think? Chime in on the same thing. What good does it do to talk about it? If I come to see any one of you as a professional, how is it going to help me to talk about it?
Well, I definitely appreciate the upgrade because I'm not a doctor as yet, but we'll just claim that. Okay. So I would definitely agree with what Dr. Williamson is saying, because not talking about it makes it stay inside. And then it just bubbles up and it becomes anxiety, irritability. You're sharing that at work. People are like, what's wrong with you? And you don't tend to actually realize what's happening because you're just in it yourself, and you're keeping it in your own mind, in your own heart, in your own soul. And when you are able to talk about it and to share it, it's able to be released instead of being inside of you. You're able to release that.
All right. Well, I'm gonna take your word for it as we go. I see you want to jump in there, Dr. Shimromi. Go ahead.
So the way you started that question, you started asking about your grandfather who had been through the Great Depression, et cetera. And I want to move back to that point for just a second. There is a reason that therapy is a profession, that it is something that you need to be taught, something that, again, you need specific skills. And one thing I do want to caution is, as a narrative therapist, when I think about the geriatric population, the way we are programmed to think, we think, okay, I'm going to talk through this and it's going to help. For our older generation, especially those who were in those experiences, those things cause trauma, that they were traumatized, be it on a conscious or an unconscious level. And what I would caution is, again, in good intention, we might want to at home start those conversations, but are not equipped to deal with the emotions that might come. So again, definitely want to advocate for professional help where that's concerned. With our geriatric population, the depression might present differently. So again, based on our thought, and it could be categorized that as ageism or just our societal belief on what the process of aging entails. We might see our loved ones who are older and they have become less interactive or more withdrawn. We see that as a normal part of aging when it is not. Those are actually telltale signs of depression. In the geriatric population, the primary care physician is the gateway to holistic health for the geriatric population. So what I would definitely put is, you want to be looking for more clinical biological manifestations of what they might be going through. So you might realize that they start eating less or sleeping more, or those chronic conditions that they're battling may begin to exacerbate. So when we get to talk more about that, we'll talk about what does it look like getting medical care for the geriatric population right now. And one thing that you mentioned, I also work with the Alzheimer's Association as a community educator. I also own and operate a hospice company and a palliative company. How is that relevant? At this time, we are seeing that dealing with COVID, the manifestations of medical decline is very different. And if I were to fill out a death certificate at this time, a lot of patients, a lot of geriatric patients are dying from the mental health effects of COVID, again, which is manifesting in decline in overall medical condition. So definitely want to say that if you see that your older family members are eating less, sleeping more, if they were walking upright before, but now they're hunched over or shuffling, those are not normal signs of aging. And those are, in fact, signs of underlying mental health and medical issues. So what if they were walking with a walker before, and now you see them shuffling, unsteady gait? Those are all symptoms of mental health issues leading to medical decline that we certainly need to be aware of. And again, do not start those conversations that you are not equipped to carry out. You need to preserve integrity and honor autonomy by allowing them to lead. If they lead you into that conversation, then the best thing that you can do is be there and be present, but allow them to lead. You don't take them there.
All right. I don't mean to cut you off because this is great information. And I agree that there's some differences that we need to be aware of as we look at all of the people in our lives. There's one question that I want to ask as well to the panel before I come to you specifically in your area of expertise, and Dr. Parks and Ms. Cunard, if you all want to jump in on here as well. Here's my thing. When we talk about COVID-19, it's one thing for somebody to tell me to wear a mask and to stay 6 feet away. And I heard Dr. Williamson sort of allude to this, or she did say, I don't watch these things on TV because I'm catching, to me, that's the way I'm interpreting, I'm catching some things through my, through watching or hearing things. I'm catching stuff that's gonna hurt my heart and my head. Does that make any sense? And so I guess I'm asking you now, how can I, Dr. Parks, how can I avoid exacerbating the mental effects of what's going on right now?
Well, it's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. That sounds like politics. It's a good question. Thank you for inviting me here tonight. No, I think, and I want to go back to something that Sherry Ann said. She talked about, trauma. Everybody on the panel here knows that, that all of our mental health issues are steeped in trauma. Everything comes out of trauma. And so when you look at wearing a mask, that could be traumatic for some folks, okay? If I'm answering your question correctly, think about people who may have been someone who may have been raped, someone who may have been molested, and then somebody put their hand over the mouth, you know what I'm saying? And so therefore it's like, that's triggering for them. That's a triggering mechanism for them to have, you know, a hand placed over their face. And with that on all the time, a lot of people don't know trauma. Things are, you know, steeped in trauma. People who have panic attacks, anxiety, a mask over the face doesn't help. I remember I had a panic attack on a flight coming from Miami, and it was because I left my cell phone at, you know, in the thing, and I'm like, where's my phone? And I never had one before. And they came in, and I was so embarrassed by it. I was like, and they put the thing on my face, and I'm like, I can't breathe with that thing on, you know, get that thing off of my face. I was like, I need air, that's not working for me. So that could be, you know, traumatic for some people. People with.
But I guess, Dr. Park, what I'm asking though is that, and I agree, I'm hearing what you're saying, that just the fact that we are here, the things that we have to do differently affect us differently, our mental state, our mental health differently. But I guess what I'm trying to find out is, how do I preserve my mental health when I see this going along around me? And so I'm coming to you as well, Ms. Cunard, but do you want to, you want to talk about that a little bit? How do it is so pervasive. The news is bad. People have lost numerous loved ones. There are so, tens of millions of people who are out of work. What do I do in the face of this to keep this from hurting me, my mental health? Does that make sense?
For me, one of the things that is important is that you limit the amount of contact or exposure that you have to the media, to things that these stories. From a perspective of a school psychologist working with children, we're going to see different behaviors manifested. So for a child, they may be acting out differently. For an adult, you lay down and you're depressed. You say, I'm sad, I'm crying, whatever. A child may not cry. A child may beat another student up or another child up. So it's going to be different. And in terms of protecting adults, some of us know how to self-protect. But for children, we have to also shield them from too much exposure. Too much, we can be real. I know one thing is I want to be real. I want to tell it like it is. You can be real with children, but you also have to reassure them and share with them that regardless of the situation, they're still going to be loved, cared for, and just make them feel like you have a little blanket over them, that they're protected. So, I guess I'm coming from the perspective of if it's that stressful for us as adults, imagine what it does to the children who don't even have as much information as us.
All right. I appreciate you.
Go
ahead, Dr. Go ahead.
That, you said, what can you do? You go back and you rely on, some people don't have coping skills. So I guess that's what we're talking about here. If you don't have those, then it's going to be hard for you to function through this pandemic. But for people who do, your church, your Bible, mindfulness, different things people are doing, yoga. As Melanie mentioned, limit your access to television. Every day you come on, it's the same thing over and over, and you become inundated by that. And so all of a sudden your anxiety, depression starts to build up inside of you. And as Dr. Williamson and Allison were saying, before, it's like you keep that inside of you, and then it manifests itself in different ways. And so it comes out in different ways. It can come out in, anger, depression, overeating, oversleeping. As Sherry Ann mentioned, all these different things can happen. So you have to be able, first and foremost, to recognize it, that something's going on with you, and being able to, that's the first step in being real, with yourself, being able to recognize that something is wrong and I'm not feeling how I used to feel, and then start reaching out. Start, hey, I may need to talk to someone. And I know there's like a stigma that we have about speaking to therapists or going to therapy. And yeah, that may have been, years ago, but now we really need to get in and see a therapist, because, You know, when you think about it, as I mentioned before, trauma, our ancestors were born into trauma, and that stuff gets passed on throughout, you know, generations. And so look at what happened yesterday. That's traumatic. Daily stressors, as Dr. Williams, you know, mentioned earlier. You have day-to-day trauma. You have women, you know, out there, people out there, how am I gonna feed my kids? How am I gonna pay my bills? How am I gonna pay this car note? Those are day-to-day traumas. Those are things that need to be dealt with. And if you don't have a good support system or a good way to deal with those, then yeah, you could have some serious issues going on.
You got to get that, right? You got to get it. So I'm going to come back to you, Dr. Williamson. I see you saying something, but
Yes.
I can't.
I love this panel because everybody's mentioning such important information. And I think one of the key things is understanding with things like this COVID-19 pandemic, we're feeling overwhelmed, and a lot of us, all of us, are affected at the same time in one way or another. And so, but there are many things with this COVID-19 pandemic that we cannot control. Mm-hmm. And so recognize what you can't control and focus on what you can control. Allison Barrero-Jones talked about the lavender. We can do some things with our environment, right? Nature is so healing. Taking walks out in the sunshine, playing with your pets, taking some deep breaths, inhaling and exhaling really does a lot to slow down our heart rate, slow down our breathing rate when we're feeling anxious. Taking time to just relax and laugh, do some pleasurable things with your family. Somebody talked about sleep, having a regular schedule. Sleep hygiene and regular sleep time is so restorative and healing for the body. And trying to develop new routines, because many people are working at home, children, all the way to adults in college, are doing school at home. So establishing a new routine and sticking with that gives you some predictability and certainty when so many things outside of our world are uncertain. And
but,
then sometimes, I'm sorry.
I'm in here. You got some good ideas right now, but I don't want to ask you as you continue in just a moment, but some of these things that we're doing now, we are in such a different paradigm. So the things that we could do that we used to do to blow off stress and the enjoyable nature of being with our family might not be there anymore because we're all together all the time, 24/7, along with your job. You got some ideas that take us outside of our usual paradigm, Doctor?
Well, certainly. I mean, one of the terms that you hear is that we're doing this social distancing. Mm-hmm. But that's really not an appropriate term. What we're doing is physical distancing, but we're still having to find ways and working to find ways to be socially connected. So we all have these Zoom meetings, we're on social media more, but we can do some other things like using snail mail, sending somebody a card, a letter that just really brightens up their day. You might actually get one back. I've had that happen.
Yeah.
I know, imagine that. But doing some things that what we have to be is more intentional and stopping to think about not just ourselves and what we're missing, but how can I reach out and bring some joy to somebody else? And during that connection, we can be socially connected even though we're physically distant. So I think many times we go through life just absorbing the negativity. But if we stop and think, what am I thankful for? What am I grateful for? How has God blessed me? And doing a gratitude journal can really put things in perspective. Yes, I've lost some things, but these are some of the things that I still have and that can make me feel joy. It's focusing on your glasses being half full instead of half empty when it's the same glass of water.
Oh, that's excellent.
Jump in there just a quick second.
Yes, come on. I was coming to you anyway. Please go ahead.
You know, I feel so sorry for you. I would hate to have your role in this meeting. Just a group of therapists together and we're like, my turn. So I'm praying for you.
Well, I'm just going to say before you go, from here on out, it is lightning round. And so we're going to go real fast. Keep going.
Definitely want to go back to something that Dr. Park said. And again, it's about the stigma. I think that during this pandemic, as mental health professionals, we have such an awesome opportunity. And that is to really be front and center with breaking the stigma that is around therapy. And to really trumpet the cause that it is okay to diet, it is okay to pray, it is okay to fast. Therapy is okay too. And one of the things that I'm sure that we will get to is the impact of all of this closeness. There's so many of us who are living and walking and moving and functioning with underlying trauma-induced disorders that have not been addressed. And we have been cloaked by the lifestyle, the business. We have not even had time to really sit in the impact of trauma that we've been through. And now with what is going on with, as our sister said, that the paradigm, it is in fact a paradigm shift. So be it social distancing, working from home, we are seeing the impact that in this closeness, then all of a sudden you've been married for 30 years, but now you're confronted with the real person that you have not seen in the 8 or 6 hours that you've seen them daily. So again, definitely we need to address and break the stigma. I'm in therapy. I encourage my therapist to find a therapist because she's gonna need it by the time she gets done with me. We have to break the stereotype and say that you cannot address the body, the biological, and get the optimum result if the mind and the heart is broken.
Got it. Tell me this. I want to ask you something really quickly. 2 things you are talking about, especially with respect to the elderly, and I'm pretty sure there are shades of this that everybody else needs to deal with. Talk to me in this specific pandemic right now that we're going through. And as I say that, I'm like, I don't know the last time I went through a pandemic, but anyway, in COVID-19, you got 2 opposite things going on. You got people who are close together all the time, and then you have people who are far apart and don't have access to anybody right now. Talk to me about this. For example, my own sister, is in a nursing home. And they've been isolating, so she could not have visitors, although the people there in the facility are there all the time. But then you have other people who have too much family and too much to help us navigate that right now, especially for the elderly. Really quickly, Dr. Shirome.
So one thing to clarify, much like anything else in life, it's not quality, it's quantity. I'm sorry, it's not quantity, but it's quality. I prefer to have a distant connection that is healthy and pouring into me than to be crowded with negative connections. So let's just put it that way. Again, it's the quality of the interactions. I'm very happy that you highlighted the impact in a nursing home, because we are seeing that the impact of this pandemic and the social isolation, especially in a nursing home setting, is going to be far-reaching. It's going to be there years after this. We are seeing increased mortality, more chronic conditions turning into acute. One point that I would like to stress, especially relating to the geriatric population, is addressing any dementia and Alzheimer's. So often we talk about all these other things that leads to memory deficit or Alzheimer's. The one thing that very little is said on and very little is known is the impact of depression on Alzheimer's or dementia. Depression is directly relating to, and I could say that another way, untreated depression will lead to dementia or Alzheimer's. What does that have to do with your question? We talk about socialization, loneliness, isolation. Those are all triggers for depression. So again, looking at it from that perspective, we see that one thing, COVID, that leads to the social distancing, which we need to understand that social distancing should not be isolation, but we're seeing that in those settings, it is leading to isolation. Isolation leads to hopelessness, leads to depression, which then leads to Alzheimer's. And even if it doesn't go to Alzheimer's, the research has shown that in the geriatric population, untreated depression does lead to lower mortality, which means that a geriatric patient that possibly had the probability of 5 to 10 more years of life can easily decline to the point of death within 1 to 3 years, just because of that isolation and untreated depression. So we definitely need to find every possible route that we can to keep a connection going with our geriatric population. Put a phone in the nursing home if they don't have one. Make sure that you get the phones that has the big numbers. Program your number and do everything that is possible that can get rid of the technological barriers that will increase that connection. And let's not rely on the staffing there, because what we're also seeing is an increase in elder abuse in those facilities. And we can definitely get more into that, but it is definitely a compounded crisis, and I will say crisis, that we are seeing with the geriatric population that will be far-reaching. And I see Dr.
All right, thank you. I'm coming. Hold on a second. Yeah, I know. All right. No, good. Thank you. That was excellent information. And I think everybody who's listening and watching, perhaps there are somebody in your mind, in your family, in your circle of influence that you're thinking, maybe I need to do some more. Maybe I need to do more. Allison Barrero Jones, when I was little, they couldn't keep teenagers and kids off the phone. Now they're on the phone, but they're on social media. Do they have the same kind of issues with the social isolation and the the social distancing, which really means, as Dr. Williamson says, the physical distancing? What are we seeing with them, and what are some tips for parents about how to help their adolescents? I have 2 in my house. Help me.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that question. The adolescents are utilizing their apps, their FaceTime, their Instagram, and all of that. But that doesn't take away from I'm a senior in high school and I have missed a party. I've missed graduation. They're the first class of COVID-19, and they are missing summer vacations and time with their family, and just not being able to be together. And so I have seen depression in that. I have a client that I see that I usually don't see all summer because we struggled through the school year, but her mom was like, Allison, you need to see her this summer because we're not going on vacation. There's nothing that she's able to do but be in the house because her mom is really strict with her. So she's starting to get depressed, isolated in her room, the same things that Sherry Ann is saying about the elderly is happening with the teens. They do struggle because this is a social period for them, and not being able to have that connection with their classmates and the connection that a parent wants them to have. So one of my clients is like, well, call your friends. And she was like, Mom, we don't do that anymore. You know, we FaceTime, we instant message, we do these different things. And so Mom feels like, Allison, I don't know what's going on. You know, she's not contacting anyone. She is actually contacting people. But the physical that she enjoys, the physical that they enjoy, being able to go to their party or their graduation or, you know, the next phase in life. How do I get a summer job now? Because can I get one? And the plans that you once had are now no longer in existence. And so how do you reframe that?
What are we doing for them? How, as a parent, what are our tips to help our kids who, by the way, in my experience, unless you go and open the door and walk into the room, they're not going to come out and broadcast to you, oh, I'm tired, you know, I'm depressed or whatever. They're just there all day and they're fine with being there. But there are things that are happening. Give me some tips about what I can do. I do have people who don't have summer jobs. I do have people who are missing out on graduations and their friends and things like that.
So one of the things I would say would be acknowledge that the kids need reassurance that tomorrow is going to be better. It may be different than today, COVID, and being able to recognize they're being moody and their moodiness and irritability, being able to talk to them, bringing them out of the room to say, let's do some exercise, let's walk. I believe Dr. Williamson said that. We need to get their endorphins going so that they can feel better about what's going on with them in their lives. And so we're looking for those abrupt changes in appetite. We're looking for that sleep pattern disturbance, and we're just trying to be there. One of the challenges I think we're not really looking at is that people of color are essential workers. And so when my mom walks out the door and she's a nurse and she's a patient care technician at the hospital or whatever she's going to do, I'm afraid that she might not come back, that she might catch COVID-19 and be in a hospital where I will never see them again. And you have to reassure them, because they are feeling that anxiety, especially the younger ones, that anxiety that is provoking, like, are you going to be okay? And being that example, I like to say, you're washing your hands, you're using your hand sanitizer, you're wearing your mask, and letting them know that, hey, that's okay. Get them their little cute Batman mask or whatever they need to make them feel comfortable with doing it, and say, hey, great job, Johnny. I see you're washing your hands. You know, they didn't normally wash their hands before this, so.
Well, here, I'm going to ask you one thing real quickly, and then I'm coming over to Melanie Cunard, because you know, she can jump in on this with the high school students as well. But you know, usually during any kind of crisis, people often say to you, and I see a couple of good questions in the chat, and I'm coming to them right now. But people usually say, keep your routine, keep everything this and that. And okay, I'm trying not to be too autobiographical, but let's just be honest here. We're in the house 24/7, all right? The same kinds of foods and everything like this. The schedule has gone out the window. Let's just be real. People are getting up at 10 o'clock in the morning and all that kind of stuff. Talk to me about how much should we be doing? How much of a stickler do I need to be, and how involved am I? And then I'm passing it straight to Melanie Cunard so she can do that as well. Go ahead, Melanie.
Okay, I'll go ahead. Okay, while routines are important, routines are very important, these are different times. You know, personally in my household, I'm not gonna stress if my child sleeps past 11 o'clock in the morning. You know, it's stressful, and for the adults and for the children. So if something like sleeping late one day happens, big deal. Did they do their work? Yes. Did they do their chores? Yes. As long as it's done, it's not something that we need to stress and be sticklers for. You know, there will come a time where we're going to have to start reestablishing some sort of routine. But at this point, especially going into the summer break, it's okay that we relax our rules a little bit, relax the routine a little bit, because there is, at this point, worldwide, there's really no predictability in terms of what's going to happen. So if we veer a little bit from the course, that's okay, as long as the end result is that we're emotionally healthy, that we're happy, and that we're safe in our spaces. So.
All right. Yeah. I'm going to come back to you in a moment, because I want to talk as we shift everything about looking forward. But I want to go to Dr. Parks right now. Dr. Parks, thank you. Are you hanging in with us? Thank you.
I just got all kind of stuff popping up on the screen.
Oh, wow. Well, you know, we are, you know, we talked about how people come to see you if they've got anger issues and they've got to work through that kind of thing. But you know, truly what's going on right now is there is a measure of grief. Is that not true? There's a measure of grief. And so what is this, and how would people be grieving, and why? I mean, I guess there's some obvious answers to that, because, you know, there's so many people who are losing friends and relatives and all that. You know, here again, this is, unfortunately, this has been my experience. So what are we doing about that? What is happening right now in terms of grief?
Well, first of all, a lot of people are grieving right now. The only issue is that it's hard to recognize, because we usually associate grief with death and dying. And so if you haven't lost anyone, you may ask yourself, well, what am I grieving? Well,
the ambiguous loss.
yeah. So if you have, we typically think about, like I said, death and dying, but if there was something that you were expecting to happen and it didn't happen, something that it was going to be one way and then it shifted, or you assumed something was going to happen and it fell through, that's pretty much what grief is. Grief is basically unmet expectations, and so like I had an uncle. What are some of the things people are grieving right now? I had an uncle who passed last week in Albany, Georgia, which is like, I guess, the epicenter, the hotbed for Georgia. And we couldn't go to his funeral. And my mother called me trying to get from Michigan. And I'm like, Ma, you can't go, going from one hotbed to the next. Ma, you can't go. She said, that was my last brother. I don't have any more brothers. Out of 13 kids, he was the baby boy. And he passed. So I just have 3 aunts left on my mother's side, my mother and 2 other aunts. When you look at, I heard of a marriage that got canceled, this summer because they couldn't, everybody couldn't come together. Vacations, family reunions, everything that's happening. When we look at our students, we talked about them, but your students could be grieving things like what? If you have a high school student, I didn't get to clean out my locker. I didn't get to say goodbye to my teachers. I didn't get to have my last, at the end of the year, you have the parties in the room, and especially everybody knows prom. You don't get to go to prom and the signing of the yearbook. Everybody wants their yearbook signed at the end of the year. Those are things that they could be, grieving. You, if you have a college student, I have a son, that went to Oakwood. Anyway, he was at Oakwood, and people know how I feel about that, being an Andrews man. Anyway, his summer plans got canceled. Some other things, summer internships, not being able to walk at graduation, all of those things that you're not able to do. Big mama, grandmama made it all the way. You were the first one to graduate college, and now she doesn't get to go and see that. You see what I'm saying? Those are things that people are grieving right now.
What to do, Dr. Parks?
Well, there's a lot they can do, but how does it look? I want to talk about that first. How does grief come out? Anger, depression, isolation. It could be irritability, sadness, numbness, all those things that happen. As Allison said before, you have to be able, and I mentioned it earlier too, you have to be able to acknowledge that you're grieving, because that's the first step, like I said, into, being real with yourself. You got to acknowledge that, and then give yourself permission, time, and space.
All right.
Okay, to address all of those unmet issues that you have going on. And like she said, Allison said, things are going to be different. Day to day, those emotions are going to come up, but that's okay. It's normal. It's normal to do it. So then how do you cope with it? How are we coping with, what's going on right now? Some things you can do. You can talk to somebody else who's going through some of the issues. Not to say, oh, woe is me or whatever, but to discuss. We talked about that earlier. Talking to someone who's going through it, like, yeah, I didn't get to, grab this, or I didn't get to do that either. I didn't say this, goodbye to Mr. Johnson. Deep breathing exercise. I am DBT trained, for the therapists on here who know dialectical behavior therapy. And mindfulness is like the first, step. What is mindfulness? That's a state at which you're highly aware and present in the reality of the moment, accepting it, acknowledging it without judgment. And we make a lot of judgment, and we don't judge. I know everybody on here will say, well, we don't judge because God doesn't judge. We don't judge because judgments block our goals. They block vision. They block what we're trying to get accomplished. So you don't make judgments. 4 square breathing, that's something else you can do. A lot of people get into yoga, but the new catchword is mindfulness. And I think that I was reading this one article where they took away recess and they gave the kids mindfulness. And mindfulness helps 3 things. It helps you focus. It deals with emotional awareness, and impulse control. And so if you can get centered and get, your chi back, that will help you stay on track. Plan something to look forward to, something that you can do, that can happen. Plan that. Melanie talked about routines earlier. Yeah, we've changed, but there's still some things that you can do. You can still have devotion and worship in your house. You can still do those things in your home that, you used to do. Journaling. I think Dr. Williams said it earlier. Keeping a journal. Let me write down how I'm feeling about this, and then I can process it. Sherry Ann talked about going and see a therapist. Yes, we all, in this field, you pretty much have to be able to help someone else. I call it putting your mask on first. When you get on a flight, they tell you what? Put your mask on before you, help anybody else. You can't help anybody if you don't have your mask on first. That's the title of my book. Nobody steal that. Okay. And,
let me just jump in real quick, Dr. Parks, because we're going to wind down now in another 11 minutes. And there's three things I see on the chat that people are asking about, because this is all good information. But I want to take the last point that you said, because somebody asked, I see Ms. Adrienne Mintz, is that right? I don't know if I messed up your name or not. Please forgive me if I did. But she asked a good question. What happens if COVID never actually comes to an end? Which, for me, as we see the politicians opening things up without medical, is not like we're clear. It's not like there's a vaccine. It's not like in some places the numbers of cases have decreased for a certain amount of time. What if things never change? Talk to us about our new reality. I think she makes a good point. The kids' life may be different. And I saw Barack Obama's speech, his graduation speech last week. And what he said to the graduating seniors, whether they're from middle school, elementary, and high school, all the way through college, so you gotta grow up fast. That's what's happening now. Now you have to grow up. Talk to me. What if stuff never changes?
I'm going to jump in real quickly, and I think that this is such an amazing point for us to end. And I think Richard was definitely on something when he said that these have to go be ongoing conversations, because I have like 3 pages, and I'm going to be calling all of you and reading them to you guys, because I spent the time to put them together. So first phone call Richard, and then Dr. Parks, and then I'm going down the list. But I will say this. Everything that we just discussed comes down to this. We all have to accept the fact that we do not have control over anything that is happening. We cannot predict what tomorrow is going to want. We cannot predict when it's going to end. If it's going to end, we have to accept and acknowledge the fact that right now, today, life as we knew it 2 months ago has changed. And we have to tap into that innate resilience that is within all of us. How do we stay in a healthy space emotionally? How do we have that resource and reservoir to pour into, be it our children or spouses or geriatric patients? We have to center ourselves, not be burdened down by what tomorrow holds, because we don't know. We have to guard well the avenues of our soul. We have to go to our support system, prayer and fasting. We have to definitely be in tune with what's going on as far as protecting ourselves. But as far as maintaining a level of mental health, we have to let go of the need to know about what's going to happen next. When is it going to end? Because that is not a question that anyone at any level can answer. We're bracing for the second round when we haven't even gotten over the first. From the geriatric perspective, I can tell you that Georgia is incapable of giving an accurate count, because there's still assisted and nursing homes that are not disclosing. They have no idea how many people in Georgia have the disease or are dying from it. As Dr. Park says, let us master the art of being in the now. Tomorrow will have to sort itself out when we get there. Take care of yourself and your families today, because today is the only certainty that we have. let go of the need to know what's going to happen when, because no one can give that answer. No one.
Oh, beautiful. Yes, yes. Master the now, right now. Oh, I'm coming to you in just a second, Dr. Williamson, but I want to ask you, Allison Barrero Jones and Melanie Cunard, please help us when we get to the point, people are going to have to go back to work. And you have to find different providers for daycare age children. You have to deal with the idea that you're going to be in and around the world and coming back to your home and children. And same, even if you have like, high school people who are working, talk to us, give us some tips. The one person, Teresa Blakely, and if this is the Teresa Blakely that I know, shout out to you. She asked a very interesting question. What are some of the coping tactics for parents who now have to go back to work, but they need to send their kids back to daycare? And it can be challenging, especially if their daycare is closed and they got to find a new provider. Anxiety can overwhelm them. I'm assuming both the parents and the children. It was always hard to leave my kids at daycare, so I know what's being said here. Talk to us about these kinds of changes that are coming up for our families right now.
Melanie,
go
did
ahead.
you want to
Go ahead. You can go ahead.
Okay, great. So it's not going to be easy. It's not business as usual. They're your precious children and you want to have them in the most safe atmosphere. So one of the things that I would do is I would need to have the walkthrough and understand what their precautions are, what they're taking to keep your child safe and the other children safe, how many children are going to be there and what that looks like. So definitely research. And I like to say one of the things that we do at our job, my day job, is we take me minutes, my colleagues on watching. And so with that, you have to be able to take time for yourself, because if you drive yourself crazy, you can very well do that, trying to make sure your child is okay. So you have to be able to say, woosah it out, and learn coping skills so that you can teach coping skills to your children. But this telemental health is here, and it's here to help us. I have a lot of African Americans, Latinos. It's very impressive to me, and we discuss it. I have a Samoan guy that comes to see me. People are coming out from not the average person is coming to seek therapy for telemental health or in-person health. And how do we help them learn coping skills? As Terry says, Dr. Terry Parks, how are we going to teach them that? How do they show that? How do you learn that? So I said it before, I have my little lavender. I have lavender silly putty that when I get anxious, it says, "You got this." I ordered it from Etsy. Different things that I can send to Richard White on how to manage your kids during social mental health, where there are challenges going on. What are you going to do? How can you show them the love that they need and the reassurance? And so that's something that I can send out, that I have that. We don't know. That's just the bottom line.
I think what you make a good point. And Richard, I'm seeing him pop back on the screen. I'm sure that these will be part of the resources. You all the 3 pages, Dr. Sharomi, I understand, because we could talk about this all day. Give us the links and the resources so that we can follow up for good information. Melanie Cunard, did you want to add in that? And then I'm coming to Dr. Williamson. Then I want to go around and make sure that that people know how to find you, so that they want to follow up and they want to hit you up on social media or email you. They can do that, and they can find out how to connect with your practices or ask you some follow-ups. Melanie Cunard, did you want to add to that?
I was just going to piggyback on what Allison said. And one of the things it's important to do is to talk to your child before any change, such as childcare transition. Mm-hmm. Talk to your child. Kids are more intuitive than sometimes we give them credit for. They understand. I have a 5-year-old who talks about the COVID, and we never directly spoke with her about it, but she understands that it's something different. Mm-hmm. So when given the opportunity, talk to your child about any transitions that are supposed to happen. You know, you're not going to this childcare anymore. This time, you know, you're going to go with Auntie so-and-so. It may not be, mommy and daddy aren't sure how long it's going to be, but this is what's going to happen. Everything at this point is up in the air. So share it with your child as much as you feel comfortable sharing with them, and also get feedback from them to find out how they're feeling about certain things. Some may be okay and go with the flow. Some may be stressed about it or not like it, not want to do it. But it's our duty as parents and caregivers to make sure that they feel comfortable or they feel loved by us.
In the process. Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Dr. Williamson, my dear friend, Loida, I want to ask you this very tricky question, and
Okay.
I'm giving this because it looks like it came from your sister. So I'm going to ask you this tricky question, and I think this is a very good point. There are a lot of voices out there right now. There's a lot of stressful things, and so how do you balance what the CDC is saying, what media is saying, and politicians says when in that what you need to do to feel safe? I think this in of itself is something that is confusing and causes stress because you don't know who to trust. So what are you going to do?
Absolutely. Excellent question. I think the most important thing is to know your source of information. Go with individuals that are basing their recommendations based on science, based on facts, based on what's proven to work. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and there will continue to be a lot of misinformation. Go to reputable sources, the CDC, various medical organizations, the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, American Psychiatric Association. Go to reputable sources that are providing facts about what is helpful and what is harmful, and also are clearly saying what we don't know instead of guessing and just going on impressions. I also wanted to put in a plug. We said something about elder abuse. This is also in close environments. Domestic violence is going up, and abuse of children is going up because these children who may be going out to school and have teachers or counselors looking out for them, they're no longer having access to those. So make sure you are aware of in your community, or aware of your surroundings. Individuals can reach out for help. But this is also, there are people who are not safer at home because of these closed environments. So we just have to be aware as a community that everything isn't better because we're all at home.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for such good information, everyone. Richard, I'm going to toss it back to you because I don't know if we're going to go round robin, make sure that we know how we can contact people, or maybe perhaps you can give our viewers the information that they need so that they can follow up with any kind of resources.
Thank you, Carmela. I really appreciate this. Guys, thank you all for all the insightful words that you guys have passed. Really, really good stuff. I think all our viewers that did join truly enjoyed it. I got several emails and text messages on the side that says this is awesome. We have to do it again. I don't know what the schedule is, but we'll look at the schedule and try to do this one more time. To follow up, yes, we're going to collect everybody's information and put it on our website. So there's one point of resource for everybody to get more information about each one of the panelists as well. Along with getting Carmela's information, because she's promoting Message Magazine, we want to make sure everybody gets a hold of that, to share it with your family and your friends and your community in this dire time that we have right now. I also want to thank those that did participate with us today, those that gave in some questions. I thank you guys as well for doing that. And everybody on the panel, love you guys. Have a great and safe week. And look out for any more information that we have on our website. I'm making sure I say that. That's atlantamarian.com. That's where we'll keep everything so everybody can actually find more information for what questions they might have. Now, of course, there were a few questions that we didn't get to. I apologize for that. We didn't get to all questions, but maybe one or two of the panelists can answer one of them, maybe at a later time. Again, we'll still post that on our website. Guys, have a great day. This will be posted later on, so you can actually ask your friends and families and colleagues to, in turn, look out for it. I'll send an email to everybody so you can actually find this wonderful program one more time. Thank you, guys. God bless.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Have a great day.
Bye.